Welcome back, everybody. It's time for us to explore Irithyll, the Boreal Valley. We've actually heard in passing and otherwise quite a bit about this area from other NPCs and item descriptions in the game. It seems to be a fairly important place. Before we go, there's a couple of things I want to take care of.
Aha, thou returned, and a fine day it is. So, happened upon any twisted souls?
As is usual procedure after beating a boss, let's go talk to Ludleth and see what we can get from their souls. You have a choice between High Lord Wolnir's Holy Sword or a unique pyromancy. The sword is okay, but I'm more interested in the pyromancy, which is much more interesting. Though it should be noted that the Holy Sword's ability to channel Wrath of the Gods with a fairly manageable faith requirement is useful in certain situations. Black Serpent, however, is more my speed. It is one of the first spells available in this game that lets you do dark damage, which is fairly important. Many enemies in the game are more vulnerable to dark than to fire, though there are also enemies more vulnerable to fire than to dark, so you need to keep track of which is which. Still, most enemies will take reasonable damage from dark damage, so it's a good standby. As we learned from the terrifying smoldering crabs earlier, some enemies just do not care about fire whatsoever.
Ah, there you are, unkindled.
We also have a pyromancy tome to deliver to Cornix. Hopefully he can do something with this one.
I'm afraid I cannot accept.
Oh, you're the best.
This pyromancy tome is dark and delves into the depths of men where an untouchable flame resides. I cannot comprehend this myself, let alone teach it to you. It is a spell forbidden in the Great Swamp, and nearly everywhere else too. Only one terribly afflicted or burdened by deep sorrow could begin to understand this.
Well, it seems once again we're going to have to look elsewhere for somebody to unravel the mysteries of this pyromancy tome. It seems unlikely that Orvik or Irina could help, given that they specialize in other schools entirely. I briefly considered buying another copy of Firewall here, but then I remembered that in this game, due to the FP system, there is simply no reason to.
Without a pupil.
I'm not even sure you can attune multiples of the same spell. And it certainly wouldn't help you if you did. In previous games, if you did that, you would get more casts of the same spell.
Oh, hello. You've come at a good time. It took some prowling, but I finally made a score. Go on, have a gander.
So I make a bit of a long-form mistake here, in that I have not talked to Greyrat at all since I sent him out to pillage the undead settlement. This makes a certain interaction here a little bit awkward. I need to have him go pillage Irithyll, as he can now do, but it won't register.
You can keep the
I need to reload and re-enter the area for him to actually recognize the fact that we've been to Irithyll and he can pillage it.
Oh, this place is
It takes me a little while to realize this. I thought maybe that I could just talk to him again and it would fix itself, but a reload seems to be necessary. Fortunately, it was nothing game-breaking. Something that you always need to be on the lookout for in these games. Just casually replay the game up until now just to fix this one quest. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Oh, and goodbye.
No, of course, as Greyrat goes to pillage more places, his stock of purchasable item expands. Most notably, he gets some new kinds of arrows from his travels, which in a playthrough where I did not actually do very much with Greyrat, my first playthrough actually, in which I did the DLCs, I noticed that I had a very limited selection of what arrows I could buy, simply because I had not sent him to pillage anywhere. Or if I did, I had simply forgotten about it. We'll talk more about what these pillages entail in a more gameplay-centric way later on when it becomes relevant. There's more to it than meets the eye, which is not surprising, though it can be a little bit frustrating. Now, since Irithyll is a frigid valley, boreal, one might say, we are actually going to want to go packed with fire, because most of the enemies here are weak to it, or at least do not resist it. I also want to pack along the Black Serpent, just because, you know, it's new, it's fun. Let's see what we can do with it. Maybe something will come along that's weak to dark. The view, as usual, is fantastic from this vantage point, and is probably one of the most striking visuals in this entire game. Which is saying something, because for all of its various faults that I will no doubt expand upon in the future and in the past, it's very nice looking. There's a lot of really good art direction here. However, it's important at this point not to get too suckered into the prettiness, because there's a nasty surprise waiting on this bridge. Sullivan's Beast is the name of this nasty customer, and he can ruin your day if you are not careful. Fortunately, I am very well equipped to deal with him because the beast is weak to fire, and Chaos Bed Vestiges does a whole lot of damage, especially if you hit him on his large noggin, which is fairly easy to do. If you are caught unawares or you're not kitted out properly, that can be a very difficult fight. There are a number of ways that you can actually deal with him. For one, the beasts are weak to bleed, so if you have some Carthus Rouge from the catacombs, you can apply that to your weapon and he will bleed out very quickly. However, that does mean you need to get close, and he is good at punishing melee attackers with his quick and unpredictable movements. You can also simply run away, because there's an interesting facet to this bridge. Once you reach the end, you might realize that there's a barrier. You need the doll from the Cathedral of the Deep to pass by. If you don't, you'll just bounce off of it. Since the beast doesn't have the doll, it will also bounce off the barrier, meaning that you can either cheese it from there or simply ignore it entirely. If you do, however, you will have to deal with it later as you explore more of the city, because it's still around there lurking. It's an encounter with multiple ways it can go, and I kind of like it, even if the enemy itself does suffer from some odd hitboxes and a general difficulty spike. There is also something else we need to attend to on this bridge that a lot of players will probably have no idea about. This white soapstone stein is actually an inversion of what it normally does. Instead of summoning a phantom to help you, you become a phantom to help an NPC in their world. In this case, Cirrus of the Sunless Realms. And this is the first of, I believe, 2 instances you can do this in this game. Since we are in phantom form, we have reduced Estus Flask usage. Our task here is to help Cirrus defeat an old friend, Creighton the Wanderer. His presence here is somewhat interesting, but given the convoluted flow of time in this universe, it's not inexplicable. Black Serpent is an interesting spell that requires almost a combo sort of approach. You use it to deny space from the enemy, because it won't actually lock onto them and trail them. It just sort of does its own thing. However, if you use it in conjunction with, say, Chaos Bed Vestiges, the enemy is more or less guaranteed to get hit by something. For his part, Creighton the Wanderer is a fairly difficult foe. He has a lot of health, he does a lot of damage, and he can heal himself quite efficiently. He'll also throw Lloyd's talismans to block your own healing, which is something to be aware of, and when things get really dire for him, he'll pull out, the cheeky bastard, a divine blessing to heal himself the full one last time. Given that you also need to be aware of Cirrus's welfare in this fight, it won't go well for you if she dies, This can be a difficult encounter if you're not expecting it. However, if you use teamwork, or if you use Cirrus as sort of a meat shield, you can DPS down Creighton before it really becomes a problem.
Thank you for your kind assistance. Blessing of the moon upon your journey.
Upon his defeat, you return to your world and can continue on as normal. But since we need to go back to Firelink Shrine anyway to talk to Greyrat because of my own lack of foresight, we should also see if Cirrus has anything to say to this. This guy's just your average warrior of sunlight, and he's wearing the Fallen Knight set. Ha! Noob. After you do this encounter, Cirrus waits for us here.
I have not thanked you for your generous rescue. That dark spirit was one of Rosaria's fingers. Vile bastard offspring who lurk in the darkness. My sworn enemies. Fearsome invaders, to say the least. I would not have made it alone. You have my deepest gratitude. If you require help on your travels, I offer you my sign. Blessing of the moon upon your journey.
The Blessed Mailbreaker you can take or leave, but the Silver Cat ring is the real prize here, and more or less the justification for doing Cirrus's questline at all. It's a very helpful ring that negates all fall damage you would take that would not kill you. You can't use it to become immune to gravity, but it will severely reduce the amount of chip damage you take.
Fine work, I say. Discovering Irithyll in the Boreal Valley, all in a day's work. If the tales are true, it is home to old moon-worshipping nobles, and should be packed with treasure. What do you think? Shall I go and see what I can find? A fine choice. I am Greyrat the Thief. What I bring back will be worthy of that name.
Since he'll be gone for a little while, exploring Irithyll while we do, we should probably go ahead and pick up some things from him. At least an ember or something.
Goodbye. I will leave for some time. So long for now. Do stay safe, you hear? Or my efforts will have been for naught.
He's a bit nervous, but Greyrat's an okay guy.
Well.
It's always good to check in with the various merchants to see if they have anything new. In the Handmaiden's case, she probably won't because you need to give her Umbral Ash, but even so, give me a break. It's been like a year since I played this game. At least on this character, anyway. The Executioner set belonged to Horus the Hushed and is now available now that he has been, dealt with. Not much use to us because it's very heavy, but it is quite protective if you're into that sort of thing. At any rate, let's head back to the Boreal Valley and actually do some exploring. It's a very nice place, one of my favorite areas in the game. Probably a lot of people's, honestly. It's a lot like what would happen if Yharnam got a snow day. It's a fairly linear area, but there are a number of side paths to explore. And in linearity comes focus. So the challenges faced in Irithyll are fairly well designed, I would say. It's like I said, it's a good area. I think you'll enjoy it too. There's also some fairly inexplicable paranormal encounters here. Those aren't other players, those are NPCs and are scripted to happen. This enemy type is called the Pontiff Knight. They're fairly dangerous. They can inflict frostbite, they attack quickly, and they're fairly durable. They also have some range capability, but their single affinity projectile is not much to worry about. They're most dangerous in numbers. The odd noises you can hear from the side we will deal with later. They're behind that gate, presumably coming from that occupied evangelist. There's no way to get to it from here, so we'll have to wait on that. One thing about Pontiff Knights is that they have very distinctive footsteps. They sound almost like horses. I don't think that's intentional to draw some sort of parallel between Pontiff Knights and horses. It's just they've got a very clippy-clop sound to their feet. Just something I noticed. This is, however, another player, so things just got more complicated. Always when I'm trying to record. I guess it's fine. Makes things more interesting anyway. It's a little bit difficult to maintain your composure, though. 2 Chaos Bed Vestiges will take care of a Pontiff Knight, so they're not too difficult to deal with, at least for this build. I'm really starting to appreciate the power of that spell. Maybe a little less useful against people that can dodge roll, but it'll still do damage if it hits. Our friend Saber here seems to be using the spiked mace from the Evangelist, a heavy weapon that also inflicts bleeding. I'm trying to get some distance here to drink my Ashen Flask so I can get some more FP. At this point, I also remember that I do have the Way of Blue Covenant on, so I do get some help from the Blade of the Dark Moons. Something that I initially had on just to sort of give this covenant a bone, but it seems that in the interim since I last played, the covenant actually works now. On both this character and others, I've been getting help from blue spirits fairly consistently. So that's good. I might have to take it off to keep things from getting too easy. But I do have an LP to run, so I still have to pick up things and, you know, explore the area. Saber is utilizing a tried and true tactic to draw us into areas where there are enemies that have not been cleared. This is a little difficult for me to deal with right now, especially because I sort of need to explain these enemies, but Pedro Arox did me a solid there and got rid of the troublemaker, so I can go at more or less my own pace now. It seems like the second Dark Moon that got summoned is having some troubles elsewhere on the map. But they got their proofs of a Concord kept, so all in a day's work. Time to double back a little bit. I should also apologize, there are a couple of bits of this video where the audio is a bit distorted on the game's end, usually when there's a big whooshing sound, and I apologize for that. It's because this video originally got recorded as an FLV, and I had to convert it into an MP4, and a couple of things got sort of weirded up by that, but it's fine. It won't happen again, I hope. Sometimes OBS is finicky. So let's talk about some of the new enemies. These are Irithyllian slaves. They are not particularly difficult on their own, but they usually have support, either from more slaves or from bigger enemies backing them up, such as this Pyromancer Witch Knight. How did that hit none of them? Alright, Black Serpent is cool, but sometimes it's a little annoying. Chaos Bed Vestiges, much more straightforward, much more damage. Let's deal with this guy. The Witch Knights are fairly fearsome opponents because they have so much ranged coverage with their fire. But once you get up on them, ooh, I've never actually gotten that. It's a pretty nice piece. Once you get up on them, they don't have very high poise and you can stun lock them fairly easily. Now, I was sort of laboring under the mistaken impression that they were resistant to fire. That's not actually true. Oh, I hope I get that shiny. Please get that shiny past me. That would be embarrassing. I don't think I get it. I'll come back for it, I promise. Anyway. God, what was I saying? I've been completely thrown off by the fact that I missed an obvious item. At any rate, the Witch Knights, they're not fearsome at close quarters, so just close the distance and you'll be fine. Oh right, fire resistance. They are not resistant to fire, despite what I was thinking. They'll take damage from it just as well as mostly anything does. They also drop, rarely, their unique catalysts, which are useful items in their own right. They're a little weird, but they're quite powerful in the right hands. Maybe I'll try and farm one off screen. Two Pontiff Knights at once is not an easy encounter, but since I got that free shot with Chaos Vestiges on both of them, it was fairly trivial. And I keep getting these goddamn crowns. I have literally 3. I guess I'll just put one on. Now, Irithyll also plays host to a number of illusory walls, the locations of which I'm not, like, super clear on at this point. Like, I used to know them pretty well, but now I'm starting to have to rack my brains, so if you see me hitting random things in this video, it's just because I want to be sure I didn't miss any. That strange rambling noise from before is coming back into prominence here. We've actually looped around back to where that locked gate and the evangelist was, so now we can go deal with it and bring some peace and quiet to the valley. Before we do, though, it's good to pick up the Witch Tree branch, a catalyst that sacrifices power for spell speed, useful for buffs, and open that gate just in case something goes wrong. Things have gone wrong before, and let it not be said that I don't learn from my mistakes, at least after I've made them a bunch of times. Anyway, this is a unique evangelist that has a lot of health and does a little bit more damage. She actually has a name too, Doris. How do we know, you ask? Well, just wait and see. Upon her defeat, we receive Doris's Gnawing, a special miracle. This is a dark miracle, another miracle that does dark damage. However, the damage is sort of secondary to its real effect. Huge bleed build-up. Bleed build-up. It's a way to quickly inflict bleed on enemies from a safe distance. It has a fairly weighty fate requirement. Pick it up? Ah, you didn't pick it up! I'm so dumb! Whatever. Anyway, it has a faith requirement of 25, so not everybody can use it, but if used upon enemies vulnerable to bleed, it can actually just chunk them out really efficiently from a safe distance, so it's a useful thing to have. The dark damage it does on contact is fairly negligible, but it's there, I guess. A lesser version of this spell can actually be picked up from Arena if you give her the Braille Divine Tome of the Deep, which we are not doing because that does bad things to Arena's welfare and makes Egon quite mad at us. It's better to wait. None of those spells are particularly must-have anyway. The illusory wall and the railing is quite atypical, so I'm hitting places that might not usually have them just in case. I suppose that's sort of the price that I pay for taking a year-long break. This enemy configuration up here is very dangerous. We've got a Witch Knight and 2 Pontiff Knights up there, patrolling in tandem, so it's very difficult to actually get them separated from one another. I might just have to try and brute force this. There isn't really a good way to deal with it, especially now that I have the Witch's attention. Now, I think this is actually where I got the impression that those guys are resistant to fire. From my perspective, it looked like that Vestige hit both of them, but only did damage to one. But I think one of the Pontiff Knights actually body blocked it, so it just didn't reach the Pyromancer in the back. Fortunately, with his bodyguards done with, this enemy is not too difficult to deal with on his own. However, it's best to kite back with this group because there are more tough enemies waiting the further in you go. You have to check, okay? Don't judge me. Things are fairly quiet now, and we're actually coming up upon the second bonfire of the area. Third, technically, but that one at the beginning doesn't really count. But since we're still in fairly good shape here, I'm going to keep exploring. Nothing there but a cheeky message. I know for a fact that pair of doors up there will not open from this side, so I didn't bother with them. There's more pressing things to deal with. There's one more lonesome Pontiff Knight here that I want to get the drop on, just to be sure. If they start attacking you with their curved swords, they can actually keep up a pretty good combo. And since this character is fairly frail... there it is. It's better to be on the safe side. My reward for my frantic bashing of walls with my sword is the Magic Clutch Ring, which is very useful for dedicated sorcery builds. It increases all magic damage done by you, but in turn makes you slightly weaker. Just to getting hit by things. Clutch rings are fairly important in the scheme of things once you get to late game, and you need to get as much damage out of your stuff as possible. Since we're going for a more balanced build, we'll never really be doing the super high numbers with sorceries, but I'll mess around with some of the mid-range skills anyway. Same with miracles. Going for an even split means you're mostly relegated to dark spells and pyromancies. This entire side area here has absolutely nothing in it, and I think it's mostly just for show. Part of me appreciates that and the attention to detail, but part of me also thinks they could have at least put a Titanite shard back there. I mean, come on. Come on! This church and this bonfire serves as sort of the midpoint for the area. Henri is also here to greet us.
Oh, I thought it might be you. Good to see you. I never managed to find Horace, but my duty must be done, even alone, as an unkindled Lord Seeker. For the children I knew, bless their souls. We all have our reasons, don't we? Please, take this. Recompense for my foolish request. And also a token of protection. May the flames guide your way. Ah, you are brave indeed, to face your duty alone. I would do well to learn from you. May the flames guide your way.
We get both a nice gesture and a ring from Henri by talking to them here. The Ring of the Evil Eye will restore HP every time you kill an enemy, and it's a good sustain item. It partners well with the Executioner's Greatsword. Now, there's one thing in here that's extremely obscure. Unfortunately, this note makes it less awkward. Could this be an assassin? In short, try beating to a pulp. Well, okay, random note on the floor. I don't know what you're talking about, but let's go ahead and try it. I only see stat. Oh my goodness.
Lady Yuria.
That hollow there was in the employ of Yuria of Londor, who we put paid to quite a while ago now, but is still on her orders to track and eventually assassinate Henri, so we need to get rid of her to keep our buddy safe. We also get the intensely amusing chameleon spell from her. Since we have pissed off Yuria and subsequently killed her, that's the only way for us to get chameleon in this playthrough. So it's worth it even if you don't really care that much about Henri, but I do. Henri's a good kid. Who might be hundreds of years old. Look, time is convoluted. Let's take a break. This is as good a stopping point as any. We should rest and recuperate before we take on the rest of Irithyll. It only gets tougher from here. In the meantime, do be safe, or all my efforts will have been for naught. Until next time, may the flames guide thee.